Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, so sorry for the slight delay. So without further ado, we will just start straight away with our program today. So inshallah today we will be talking about the latest development that's happening in Syria and probably the future. With us today, I don't think I have to introduce our Sheikh, Dr. Muhammad Qutub, better known to us as Mufassirin. He gave us Tafsir Dar Sah, right? But today he will be talking about the Syrian issue. He is a Syrian and this issue is very close to him. He has been active in this cause since 2011. So inshallah he will be able to clear some misconceptions and explain to us what is really happening. Ahmad, welcome. So let's just get started straight to the hot topics. Yeah. So since the last 3-4 weeks when Bashar al-Assad fell, okay, so the name that we hear the most in the news everywhere is Jolani. Before this, we knew him as al-Jolani, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. Now we will know him as Ahmad Shah, right? So this guy is seen as the leader of the current rebel movement, the main movement that managed to topple the regime militarily. Is that correct, Sheikh?
Yes.
Okay, but the thing is, people are saying that he's actually al-Qaida, or he was ISIS. And if you look at the history, he actually he went to Iraq in 2003, he fought the Americans, he joined al-Qaida there, and he was jailed by the Americans. And then he was released. 2011, he went back to Syria and he formed Jabhat al-Nusra, which at that time was affiliated with al-Qaida. Is that correct, Sheikh?
Yes.
And then somehow along the way he broke away from al-Qaida and ISIS. He had disagreements with Zarqawi previously and also al-Baghdadi. And fast forward 10-13 years, he managed to control a statelet in Idlib, right? And he managed to develop the state, and he developed his army, and he united the rebel factions, and they started the attack, and what happened, and we know. But the thing is, people are saying, now Syria is under al-Qaida. Is that correct, and is there any truth to it?
Okay, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. Thank you, Dr. Ashraf, for this important question. Of course, just to make one point very clear, while we admit that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is what it eventually became, that he was responsible for, is the one that mobilized and started the what we call the battle of Rad al-Udwan, deterring aggression. But as they started that battle, more and more of the Syrian people started joining. So even during the battle, during those 11 days, yes, there were some people who were trying to say things like, oh, but this is Qaida and you are against Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and you know who Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is. But I would say most Syrians and people who are knowledgeable of the Syrian situation, even though they might not have been completely, let's say, in agreement with Ahmad al-Sharaa, formerly usually known as Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, but despite that, they realize this is not just Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. This is slowly now snowballing into the rest of the Syrian people joining the fight and going after city, as we saw from Aleppo, Idlib and Homs and so on. So it is not just Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, though we do not, it would be unfair to not give it credit as well. So we say yes, it was, but it slowly started transforming into and metamorphosizing into something else. And this is why you find that even now, most of the Syrian people, they're not really discussing that part, right? Because ultimately it was that battle, through the efforts of the Syrian people in general, initially mobilized by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which brought the regime down. Now, everything you mentioned about the history is correct. And he was asked these questions quite clearly in his BBC interview. You were essentially part of Qaida, and at one point you were looked at as part of ISIS as well, right? So he said very clearly that, at the time there was a certain situation, and he mentioned, of course, the Americans in Iraq, the invasion in 2003, and so on. And later on, what happened in Syria. But he said that when he saw the way some of those groups were, some of the extremism and so on, this is why he chose to move away. Later on, of course, he completely disavowed al-Qaida, right? And that was the formation of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, right? And that was their break with al-Qaida. And now, yes, ultimately, like I said, some people still have their issues. But if you look at the Syrian people overall, the most important thing that happened under his leadership was removing the regime, deposing the tyrant. And this is the biggest achievement that we were looking for in the first place.
Yes, so I think it's quite clear that whatever ties he had is actually broken now. And he actually fought in Idlib. I think al-Qaida tried to regain Idlib by forming Huras ad-Din.
Yeah.
So Huras ad-Din is another group formed by al-Qaida trying to topple al-Jolani,
Yes.
but Jolani fought them. So basically he actually fought al-Qaida. Also he fought ISIS. Everyone in Syria fought ISIS, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the story.
Yeah.
So Sheikh, if you can see the transformation of Jolani's image, and if you look his previous pictures, he was wearing turban and so open. Now currently he's wearing like you. So I mean, is this a real transformation? I mean, is he trying to show that he is fit to be? I'm not trying to say that he wants to be the leader of Syria, but to show to the people that they're actually moderate, there's nothing to be scared about them. Is it real, or is it just, you think it's just lip service, or is it just, smoke screen?
Again, notice that people are not really discussing this, right? Even though they might have their issues with Ahmad al-Sharaa and with the way he ran Idlib, and they had their criticisms and so on. But yet, some of those people said, despite all of that, now that they have achieved what they have achieved, and they are making some good decisions, then we stand with him, right? Changing his image and so on and so forth. I mean, these things, yes, might affect some people. They may not be so important to others. The fact that, is he trying to please or show that they are moderate? Maybe. Islam is always being maligned, especially those who are performing the jihad. They're going to be maligned. They're always going to be put in a negative light. If, wearing a suit makes him look more positive, so be it. Wearing clothes, right? Clothes is an issue. It's not an issue of sunnah or not sunnah. This is a common misconception amongst people that, you are wearing according to sunnah. These are issues which are subject to cultural norms, even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's not so much of an issue. Is he trying to change his image? I think he is, absolutely. And that's why he's going with the name Ahmad al-Sharaa now. And that's, there's nothing wrong with that. Especially if he is more in the limelight now, then, making some changes is not a big deal. It's about the fundamentals, right? And believe you me, if he starts to compromise on the fundamentals of the thawra, the revolution, because this whole 14 years, every time someone came up and maybe, became popular somehow, or was popularized by a certain organization or country that didn't want the revolution to succeed, every time that happened, and then we noticed that they are slightly now veering away from the fundamental principles for which we came out in order to depose this tyrant in the first place, immediately that person was considered persona non grata by the Syrian people and eventually probably fell into oblivion. The same will happen with him if he starts to do something like this. But personally, I don't think this is what he's trying to do. It's just that Right now, yeah, everyone wants to come and meet with him, the British and the French and now the Americans, and everyone wants to come because everyone now remembered, oh, Syria, yeah, of course, the Syrian people, the Syrian catastrophe over the last 14 years, but now that Assad is deposed and there's a new administration, of course, we need to get in on this, just like everyone wanted to get in on the revolution from the very beginning. Everyone wanted to advance their own interest. In the end, unfortunately, it's all about political interests, Doctor.
Thank you, Sheikh. So, thank you, Doctor. Okay, I think enough about al-Jolani. Now, coming on.
Can I say something else about Jolani? Because there's the issue of the image now. So some people are saying, oh, subhanallah, all of a sudden, the Western media as well is painting him as a moderate. And no, he's severed all of his ties. Why does it seem now that the Western press is impressed with Jolani, with Ahmad al-Sharaa, and almost helping to rebrand himself in one way or another? And the answer to that, I will tell you honestly, is it's actually the same position with regards to the Syrian Revolution itself. Why does it seem that the West in general, and maybe America in particular, or America and the UK in particular, were supportive of the Syrian Revolution? But when there's another genocide happening right next door in Gaza, they don't want to have anything to do with it, and they're completely with the Zionists, right? And the reason for that is the connection with Iran. Bashar's connection with Iran. Had Bashar severed that connection with Iran, they could care less about the Syrian people or the Syrian Revolution. Let him continue torturing them inside Naya and Tadmur and Fir' Palestine of Dimashq and everywhere else. The only thing that bothered them was this connection with Iran. It's lip service, to be honest, this whole thing about human rights, because this is what Gaza is teaching you now, that it's not about human rights, right? It's not about justice, but it's about state interest. So because he had that connection, so that's why they were generally supportive, generally, underline, generally supportive of the Syrian uprising. Nothing about, oh yeah, they're the ones who gave them the weapons and they couldn't have won without baloney, my dear brothers and sisters. From the very beginning, they said, give them non-game changing weapons. In other words, toys, just to keep the thing going, okay? Just to keep it going, not to topple the regime. Don't give them anything that would allow them to topple the regime, right? So their support was to a large extent just about that, and because of the issue of Iran. And now their slightly more positive look upon Ahmad al-Sharaa is also because of this. It's similar to that. That's the only reason that they look at it a little bit better, because okay, they fought Iran, they got rid of Iran, they got rid of the Iranian militias, and now let's try to make Syria another candidate for normalizing relations with Israel, right? So that's more what it's about than anything else.
So very interesting. So following up from your point, there's now many people actually, especially this leftist-leaning or anti-Zionist or pro-Russian people or pro-axis of resistance people, they say that this revolution, the fall of Assad, only benefits Israel. And it's actually, sometimes some of them actually say the whole revolution from the start, from the beginning, is actually a foreign conspiracy, okay, which serves only their interest, okay? As if the Syrian people, they don't have agency, they don't have their own will, okay? As if, I mean, they just easily gullible, manipulated. And but then again, the events that happened right after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, I mean, less than 24 hours after Bashar fell, Israel, I think they launched 200, 300, more than
almost 800 now.
800 airstrikes targeting military installations of the Syrian army.
Yeah.
Okay, up until Aleppo, up until Latakia and the whole of Syria.
Yeah.
And they started entering Syrian land, Quneitra, right? And they actually displaced people from Syria. And then again, initially we see maybe absent no direct response from the government at that time. So probably these kind of things embolden people to say that actually this is how it benefits Israel.
Right.
And after that, Netanyahu said Golan Heights will be Israel forever, and they are planning to build more settlements and so on and so forth. So how do you see this situation, Doctor?
Yeah, this is a very important point, to be honest, and there's a lot of spin. There's a lot of these spin doctors who are trying to portray the whole thing as some kind of a conspiracy, an Israeli conspiracy, and in that they are parroting the accusations of Bashar al-Assad himself. He has been calling the Syrian Revolution a conspiracy, right? A global conspiracy against him from the very beginning. And of course, that we are all terrorists, all the Syrian people are terrorists, and they're all in cahoots with the Zionists, and this is all the work of Israel and all of this garbage. By the way, he was saying this in the beginning of the Arab Spring, if you remember. When the Arab Spring happened, Tunisia and Libya and Egypt, so they immediately started saying, oh yeah, this is all the Camp David countries, all of the countries that agreed to Camp David, who agreed to a peace with Israel. The people are now protesting against them because of peace with Israel. And here we are, he thought, of course, that they are immune now to the Arab Spring because we are the axis of resistance. And then immediately the Syrian Revolution started. So it was laughable that this is what they were saying on state TV. People were protesting against peace against Israel, and he thought that he was going to be immune from it. So it's just more of the same in that way. But the part of the problem with all of these spin doctors is that they clearly have no respect for the Syrian people. So you are telling me now that hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of Syrians who are celebrating the fall of one of the most tyrannical regimes they don't understand politics, and they don't know what's going on, and they don't realize that now Qaida is going to rule them, and this and that. Subhanallah. Before you say anything so idiotic, think about the fact and look at, you are watching live the hundreds of thousands of Syrians going out and celebrating the fall of the regime. Maybe they know better than you do. They are Syrians, right? Or are they all agents of the Zionists? So this is why the Syrian people realize this is not an issue of Qaida or non-Qaida now. This is, deposing the regime, and then there are issues that maybe we will discuss amongst ourselves. But the most important thing is the fall of the regime, deposing the regime. When it comes to the Zionists, of course, and Israel, it's I can understand the confusion. I won't say that it's completely unwarranted, especially in lieu of the incapacity of many of the countries, Arab and Muslim countries, who seem to be doing absolutely nothing, right? Except maybe giving speeches about how Israel should do this and shouldn't do that, right? So then you see Iran actually firing at Israel, the Houthis, right? Hezbollah and all of these things. So I can understand the confusion to a certain extent. However, again, there's a lot of spin there, because we as Syrians, we call his father, Hafid al-Assad, the one who sold the Golan, Ba'i' al-Jolani. That's his title, the one who sold the Golan. Because it is well known to us now that actually he commanded the Syrian army at the time to retreat. There was clearly an agreement between him and the Zionists that the Zionists will take the Golan. Of course, what was the price? Keeping Hafiz al-Assad in power. So he told them to retreat, and the soldiers were like, but we've already taken the territory, we're here. No, come back, retreat. Subhanallah. So he is known as the one who sold the Golan. We know the Assad regime is the last one that will do anything to hurt the Zionists, right? And this is why as soon as the regime fell, Netanyahu said the 1974 agreement is null. The 1974 agreement, which essentially guaranteed that the kind of engagement that there would be, which is to say none, right? And this is why Bashar, Hafiz, and then his son Bashar kept the borders so peaceful across those decades. More peaceful than even the border with Egypt and the border with Jordan. They were some of the most peaceful borders with Syria, right? That's why even, I believe it was a Jewish professor in the beginning of the revolution who said, we are witnessing a peace agreement now coming apart. And he said, and people would say, what peace agreement? He said the peace agreement between Syria and Israel. But there is no peace agreement between Syria and Israel. There's no peace agreement written on paper. There's a non-verbal peace agreement. And this is why he kept the borders peaceful, and they were happy with this. And that's why they kept him in power, and they weren't interested in shooting and destroying all of the weapons that he had, because he was the guarantor at the time. As soon as he fell, the Zionists went berserk. Now, these weapons can fall into people who really, genuinely are against us. And that's why they went on that destruction spree, where they destroyed everything all over the country. This is not to say they were not hitting Syria before. My brothers and sisters, Syria became a free-for-all for everyone. For the Iranians and the Russians and the Americans and the Kurds and the Turks. Bashar al-Assad made it a free country for all. Do whatever you want. And the Zionists ultimately. They were bombing all the time. You just don't hear about it. They would bomb as close as the place where he is meeting with his ministers. And all they would say, sometimes they wouldn't say anything at all. And sometimes they would say that we will respond in the right time and the right place. But that never came, subhanAllah, over decades, right? So a lot of these people, subhanAllah, you really touched on an important point. The anti-Zionist activists, the anti-imperialist activists, the one who are ready to speak against Israel or against the imperial ambitions of the West in general, right? They dare to speak about these things, and that's why when they speak about Israel, yes, a lot of what they say seems to be very palatable and genuine. But once it came to the Syrian Revolution, subhanAllah, they just seemed so misguided. And I noticed this from the very beginning, from 2011. People like George Galloway. I mean, when George Galloway speaks about, the Arabs and Palestine, everyone signs on, right? And I was one of them. But then once it came to Syria, subhanAllah, he spoke as if he almost supported the tyrant himself. Went completely astray. And I wondered about this. What is happening with these people? Robert Fisk, same. But these are older names. The names you see now are Scott Ritter, Richard Medhurst, Max Blumenthal. Many of these people you might have heard or read articles for. They are all part of this clique, the anti-Zionist, anti-imperialist clique. But when it comes to Syria, subhanAllah, it's almost like they're defending Bashar al-Assad. And to be honest, it seems like most of the people who got it right are Muslims and Arabs in general. I have found this confusion more amongst the non-Arabs than the Arabs themselves. The Arabs seem to understand it. These people, they are completely, almost like they are spokesmen for the regime. And it turns out that Russia and Iran were actually paying them money. They were on the payroll in order to spew this kind of venom against the Syrian people. And to be honest, it is not only a crime against the Syrian people, it's a crime for the whole Palestine, pro-Palestine movement. Because now they are showing that they are not good defenders of the Palestinians at all when they condemn one genocide but support another.
You have a question? Okay. Please.
Shall we keep the questions to the end? After we finish, then we'll have the questions.
Okay?
Yeah, inshallah. We'll keep the questions to the end, inshallah.
Right. You're just gonna add
whenever you guys are rough, you guys are almost at the end, but I'm happy at
Almost at the end. Okay, okay, Sheikh. So that's a very good point. Now, since we have questions, so I'll just move on with the questions that we have now. So, of course, we no doubt that the Syrian people has achieved a great victory, yeah, in the last few weeks. But of course, that is actually only half of the battle. Okay, because another half of the battle still lies ahead.
Yes.
How to develop Syria, how to keep the victory.
Yeah.
And as we all know, as we all have seen, as with any revolutions, okay, there will always be the threat of counter-revolutions. Yeah, as we saw in Egypt, yeah, how Morsi was deposed.
The whole Arab Spring.
The whole Arab Spring.
The counter-revolutions affected the whole spring.
Exactly, and if you go back, yeah, and even the French Revolution had counter-revolution.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. The Catholic counter-revolution.
Exactly.
Yes, you're right.
So how? I mean, that is one of the challenges that is facing the new Syria now. On top of the economic challenges, you
Yes.
still have sanctions, and as you have mentioned yesterday, that the social fabric of Syria is a mosaic of religion, of races, and also we see people with different ideologies are now competing for place in the new Syria. And we have seen yesterday there were a couple of hundred people demonstrating in Damascus, asking
really
for
something.
secularism and liberalism. I mean, it's just how many weeks after Bashar fell and they're already protesting. But alhamdulillah, and there's no Bashar, so they were in.
They had the freedom to speak. Exactly.
Yes. So the question is how to. This is a very fragile time. So how do you think the Syrian people, will manage to navigate through these very critical moments?
Yeah, this is a very important point, and actually, I think it highlights some of the hypocrisy when you have these diplomatic visitors and delegations visiting and already asking about what kind of state will Syria be, and will they allow this and will they allow that. Subhanallah, we're not out of the woods yet. We just toppled one of the most tyrannical regimes less than 2 weeks ago. What are you talking about? You're already talking about, what kind of state and this and that. It's really irritating. And we faced this, by the way, during the revolution as well. So people would come to some of the mujahideen here and there, and they would ask questions like this. What kind of state are you after? The regime is still in power, and he's still killing people on a daily basis, and you're asking what kind of state? Of course, because support then would be conditional on what kind of state that you want. Are you going to build a secular state that we want to see, or something a little bit different that we don't want to see, right? So, but these questions were coming even then. Questions like, are you going to allow women to participate in the parliament? Subhanallah. People are being killed on a daily basis. Men, women, and children. And they are asking, are you going to allow women to be in the parliament? What is it to you? Leave us be. Let us deal with it. Just like we dealt with the regime. We'll deal with it. We'll deal with our differences, right? But this is happening even now, and technically this is not the time for it either. Do you think Assad is just going to leave us? If the statement that he made is authentic, and Allahu A'lam if it is, because it seems like they deleted it, but he said something to the effect of, I didn't step down. So he's still going to try to terrorize the Syrian people and move his cronies and his cells wherever they are. So there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of danger to the revolution. So you mentioned Egypt. Egypt democratically elected their president after thousands of years. And then less than a year later, subhanallah, the counter-revolution happened. So we're not out of the woods. It's not the time to say, will you allow alcohol in the country? These kinds of questions it's almost like they are purposely instigatory. And they should not be answered in any way. I'm more concerned about keeping the peace now for the Syrian people. We have things to deal with. We have all kinds of enemies that want to ruin our happiness now, that are talking about us as if we are Zionist agents, right? That are talking as if, we are all part of Qaida or something insane like that. So you see these kinds of things, these kinds of accusations. right now we need to concentrate on some of these challenges. There are still many of the Assad cronies and supporters who have blood on their hands. We have to bring them to justice. These things talk about what kind of state and all of this. This is a transitional period, right? And I think to a certain extent, Ahmad al-Sharaa may have answered some of those things in a positive way, saying that, look, this is something the future administration will deal with. This is not something I'm going to pass judgment on. But these are the main challenges really now, Doctor. And you mentioned the secularists already, subhanallah. They came out, right, again, claiming that it was a huge protest, even though it was quite small. And it's so ironic that you couldn't have ever come out and done a protest like this during the Assad regime, but you come out and you are insulting the administration because they are quote unquote Islamist, and you say we want secularism and we don't want to go back to the let's say that which belongs to the ancient or ancient times, because this is how the secularists talk about Islam. Oh, an ancient religion and it's not suitable for the times and this and that. So they call it, they give it these terms, right? Raj'iyya and takhalluf and all of these things. Backwardness, we're not going to go back to backwardness, we want a secular state. Well, I hate to tell you, it's this backwardness you're criticizing which gave you the freedom to come out here and do the protest in the first place. And I think it is very disingenuous for them in all cases, not just because I completely disagree with them, and it's disrespectful to the whole Syrian people who are very proud of their Muslim identity despite decades of the Assad regime trying to obliterate Islam from the hearts of the Syrian people, and he failed, right? The whole regime failed at that. Despite that, and despite the fact that I'm against them, it's not so much that we are against your opinion, but it's very disingenuous when we are dealing with all of these things now, that you are coming now and starting to talk about, we want a secular state and we want this and that. Go and work. Do the necessary work now to keep the peace. Administratively, a lot of things need to be done. You're coming out and protesting and saying we want a secular state. By the way, these secular liberals, are they the ones who brought freedom? Are they the ones who deposed the tyrant? How many secular liberals fought to bring down the regime? It's hypocrisy, and it's extremely disingenuous to do something like this. So the counter-revolution has already started, Doctor. The counter-revolution has already started. And we need to be very careful, and there's a lot of work to be done. Otherwise, God forbid, they will try to bring the regime back through the window after we kicked him out of the door. Yeah.
Let's pray for the best for the future of the Syrian people, inshallah. So last question, okay, before we open to first coach, okay? So as an outsider, outside of Syria, after hearing all this, obviously Syria is in need of help, all the help it can get to rebuild, okay, to recover from this war, a long war. So as an outsider, what is the best way to maybe we can contribute to the development of Syria?
Thank you, that's an important question. Ultimately, it's about awareness. It's about building awareness. The administration has also said that eventually it will be a technocratic government. It will be a quote-unquote professional government made of professionals. We need all the help we can get. We need that professional expertise. I was asked a question similar to this, talking about professionals and professionalism. I said, brother, if you're a professional, please come and help. If you have that expertise, we will welcome it. So there are things we can do. If you have a special expertise, you may be able to help them, maybe from where you are. Maybe you don't have to actually go there, but from where you are, you can try to help. And of course, awareness. The importance of awareness is critical. You are seeing with the genocide in Gaza, you're seeing the effect of spin now. Victims now of chemical weapons attacks by the Assad regime are now able to speak. At one time, they were labeled by all of these anti-Zionist activists as theatricians and actors, as if they made up and they staged the whole chemical attack, subhanallah. So I mean to say, awareness is very important. Creating that awareness. Social media now is the go-to media, I think, for most people. Spreading that kind of awareness will help, because public opinion will be important as well. Wa iyyakum,
Now
barakallahu
we
fikum.
open for questions. Coach Vince, please.
Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother.
I have a question, not just myself, we're a little bit confused. It's been very difficult years on the Syrian people. The Assad regime, and first of all, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar, wa lillahi alhamd.
The big demon of the hellfire is
Alhamdulillah.
out, and he deserves the punishment coming to him in this life.
Alhamdulillah.
But what we're confused about is that Russia has always sort of backed the Syrian for their own personal understanding, natural gas, whatever.
Yeah, state
I'm
interests.
not gonna get
Yeah.
into the political, I'm a very layman with knowledge. Our confusion is, why has it been so easy to topple the government just like that? And my question is this: we're finding it confusing why it's been so easy to take Assad out of his chair, run out of his country, when you have Russia on the border of Golan, I think it's Golan.
You mean Israel? Israel next to the Golan?
Russia also have a
Okay.
Seashore, yeah, Russia.
Okay, I mean on the coast, yes, on the coast.
Like I said, I'm a layman, so forgive
But
me.
no issues,
So
brother.
you've got Russia on the border protecting Syria.
Yeah.
And this belongs to Syria, not Israel.
Okay.
So they send all their troops there. They're there now as we speak
Hmm.
to combat Israel. How is it possible to topple the Assad regime with the Russian army there
Okay.
in Syria?
Okay.
And why has it been so? Why has it seemed to be so easy
Right.
after so many years? And the reason we say this is because there's been murders, suffering, rapes, tortures over a period of years upon years upon years on the Syrian people. And it's been divided. Now they've had the Zionists, the Russians, the Iranians, and Hezbollah helping the Syrians in every aspect of the world.
Helping the regime.
The regime. Assad. Now, all of a sudden, this is my question. All of a sudden, you've got Iran, Hezbollah, Russia, and whatever other, Turkey, Erdogan, we all know, let's not even get into that one, helping Assad's regime. All of a sudden, a group in Syria has managed to topple the regime with all the extra help around. My question is, how's that possible?
Well, so I think the gist of the brother's question is, how is it with Russia, with all the support that the regime had, that he was toppled so quickly? Well, so my first response would be, he wasn't toppled that quickly. It took 14 bloody years.
Sorry, hello?
He wasn't toppled that quickly. It took 14 bloody years of revolution.
That's my question.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I know exactly what you're saying, brother. But what I'm trying to tell you is, the 11 days that it happened in lightning speed, is part and parcel of the sacrifices of 14 bloody years. You cannot disconnect that. So keep that in mind, right? And this is why he's been in power for all those 14 years, because of his backers. Otherwise he would have lost long time ago. We said that before, that at the end of 2012, beginning 2013, we almost succeeded in toppling him. And people were actually threatening him because they were that close to his palace. Yeah? 2015, end of 2015, Russia interferes militarily to save the Assad regime, saying if we hadn't, Damascus would fall in 2 weeks. Right? So, they have been supporting him throughout the 14 years. Yeah? Almost 14
We're
years.
talking about a powerhouse of Russia. But this is my question.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is
I'm getting there now. So, the reason he didn't fall throughout all of this time is because of those propping him up. Otherwise, this lightning fall that you saw of the regime may have happened many, many years ago with a lot of lives saved. But it was because of his backers, because of the Russians, because of the Iranians, because of Hezbollah. Now, what happened now? What was so magical now in these 11 days? Number one, we are Muslims and we know Allah willed it, and that's why it happened. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge. Allahu Akbar. It is something on another level, and people are still marveling at how quickly he fell and cannot believe that they are rid of the Assad regime finally. People who only know the Assad regime, right, in their whole life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed it. Allah is in charge, and Allah is almighty. Number one. Number two, Turkey did a lot to help the opposition, and we admit this. And they also had an important role, apparently, in deterring aggression these 11 days. Now, if you are looking for a worldly explanation for why he fell, the most common one would be that his backers said enough is enough. We're not supporting him anymore. They lifted their support.
Now, to me, that's the only thing that makes logic. What's the reason for that? Do we know a reason for that? Why they turned
They got sick of it. They got sick of it. Iran, of course, Gaza, it's related to Gaza as well. I don't think it's right to completely not make that connection to Gaza as well. The genocide in Gaza also had an effect, because the genocide in Gaza is changing the geopolitics of the region. Okay, of course, Iran may have been weakened to a certain extent, and I think they are beginning to realize also that their interests no longer lie with Assad. And in fact, in an article, apparently, Hakan Fidan of Turkey said something to the effect that we were able to convince the Russians and the Iranians that enough is enough. And they pulled the plug on him, essentially. And that's why you saw the apocalyptic fall, you know, whereby they just completely retreated. And even some of their, they're not exactly supporters, but they were part of the regime in one way or another as civilians, right? So they are saying, like, he just ran away, he just fled. The military didn't do anything, they just completely retreated. Where did they go? We feel completely betrayed, and so on and so forth. So the decision was to pull the plug on him. Even though, subhanAllah, just up to a few weeks ago, he was being whitewashed. His crimes were being whitewashed, and he was being prepared to rule again and to be invited now to the world's capitals again as the president of Syria, who was able to get rid of the terrorist threat that has plagued his country for 14 years. So ultimately, it seems that that's what it is. Once they pulled the plug on him, brother, that was it. It crumbled before our eyes.
They got control of their resources, and then I need him anymore.
Sorry? Now, in terms of resources, yeah, so for a long time, Russia felt that their interests lay with him. But after everything that happened, the country was a failed state in all cases. Even though he was able to take back a lot of the country and a lot of the land, and the opposition was now restricted to the northwest in Idlib, despite that, the country was a failed state. And the Russians and the Iranians could see this. And I think at one point they just said, yeah, this is no longer serving our interests. And they just gave up on him. And ultimately, keep this in mind, these are the criteria for states and countries, brothers and sisters. It's not human rights, unfortunately. Welcome to the world of realpolitik. It's not human rights. It's not morality either. It's not morality either.
Give up on him. Sorry to interrupt you.
Just a minute, let me just finish this point. So it's not morality either, it's state interests. It's how that particular country or state can further its interests. And once they realize that this is no longer in their interest, of course Russia is bogged down with the war in Ukraine, as you know, and what's happening in Iran and Lebanon. So all of these things led to his final demise.
And now they're harboring him in Russia.
They're harboring him in Russia, but it seems until now, Putin hasn't actually communicated with him. It's been a while. He hasn't even communicated with him yet. So he's probably going to be persona non grata there as well, inshallah. He's living like a refugee. Now he knows and he tastes what the Syrians maybe have tasted for many, many years. وإياكم.
Shall we wrap it up?
No, if there's any other questions.
Sorry, just to carry on. So it wasn't really out of choice. Like you said, Iran was getting exhausted in Lebanon, and Russia is getting exhausted in Ukraine. So it wasn't really out of choice.
What do you mean out of choice?
Out of their own.
Oh, you mean they wanted him to continue?
No, not necessarily. But you said when they realised
It doesn't serve their
interest.
Right.
I think their interest was being exhausted elsewhere. They had no choice
Uh,
to exit.
Well, with time, we will discover more and more about what were the real intentions, right? But for now, what seems to be coming to us and leaked from here and there is that they felt that he was more of a liability now than someone who served their interest and the interest of the country as a whole. Would they have liked for him to stay? Absolutely. But mainly Iran, even more than Russia. I was mentioning this in 2012. For Iran, brothers and sisters, it is a battle for life and death. It is the battle against the arch enemy. Who's the arch enemy?
Sunni.
The Sunnis, not Israel. The Sunnis are the arch enemy of Iran. Okay, and this is why the Iranians have said it quite clearly, even to the Zionists. Our enemies are the Arabs. They don't mind putting their hands in the hands of the Zionists if it is against the Arabs. So for Iran, yes, they would have liked to stay with him, absolutely. And in fact, they, in their ideology and eschatology, this is part of eschatology, what happened in Syria. What happened in Syria from 2011 is part of Iranian eschatology. These are part of the end times. They would talk about an earthquake that happened in Harasta, that this is what their hadith foretold, right? So these kinds of things, for Iran, this was a religious war, and they were gonna go to the end. For Russia, it was more about state interests. So once they decided he's a liability, that's it. And they probably got, because you know, Turkey, Iran, and Russia have had the whole Astana axis for all this time. So Turkey probably told the Russians, look, we will convince the opposition not to completely destroy your Hmeimim air base or your naval base in Tartus. So, pull the plug on Assad and we'll convince them to, have some kind of, dialogue with you about how you can kind of preserve your interests in Syria, because that's what Russia wants. Russia wants a port on the Mediterranean. This is geopolitically, this is their dream for centuries. The warm waters of the Mediterranean, yeah.
Is there a possibility that China is hiding behind the...
China is behind everything? Well,
Behind everything. I said, do you believe that China is behind, at least in the background, making sure that when there's business to be done, they're there?
well, when it comes to business, brother,
Every country that the USA has destroyed in military-wise, Iraq, everywhere, China is now building the infrastructure.
China's after the money, and they're doing so in many places, as we know.
China come out from Syria.
Mind you, but I mean, look at the Americans. Immediately they went into Syria. Why? For the oil, right? The oil fields in the northeast. So everyone wants business, brother. In the end, you don't think these delegations are also coming to discuss business and business deals, and we can give you this, and we can give you that, and we can develop this and develop that. It's all about business in the end. It's all about the pie. How much of the pie can you take? So China, like anyone else, wants part of the pie. And China, we know, it seems cares more about the pie than maybe global hegemony, right? Okay, we ended there.
Okay, I think time is running out, so thank you very much to Dr. Muhammad for a very theory and enlightening session. So I hope you all learn something today. So inshallah, looking forward to hear from you next week.
Inshallah. Barakallah feek. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Jazakumullah. Assalamu
Barakallah
alaikum.
feekum.